If you're in construction, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Constructive Behaviors Podcast. I'm your host, Barb Allen. I'm a woman with decades of experience in the construction industry, and most of it on the job site. I know how rewarding this industry can be. But like you, I also know that we could improve. Let's work together to make changes from the inside out. On a job site where it's clear that the project manager and the superintendent do not get along, or that the PM and superintendent are clearly not on the same page? And have you felt how that dynamic affects meetings, interactions, and the job site as a whole? Today's guest is Coy McKinney. He is the Senior Vice President for Transwestern Development Company, but more importantly, Coy was once my project manager partner on a 35-acre campus project for San Jacinto Community College in Houston, Texas. Today, Coy and I are going to talk about the importance of the relationship between the project manager and the superintendent on any construction project, and how to build the necessary unified team dynamic between the two of you that sets the stage for all team members on your project. But before we get into that, I want you to learn a little more about Coy. Over the years, Coy has become the much older brother that I never had. And I will warn you that throughout this episode, you will most likely hear that sibling rivalry and sarcasm between us as we tell our story. But Coy, go ahead and talk a bit about yourself and what your path has been in the industry.
Thanks, Barb. Yeah, you're right. It's kind of it's fun to sit here and talk with you about this and look back on the project that we did together, projects. But to hear you say one thing that stuck out to me in that intro was that you called me a project manager partner, and I'm curious. We'll touch on this a little later, but I'm curious to see if you would have called me your project manager partner when we first started the job, before we got started. Or is that something that you realized later on after the job was completed, that we were partners? So we'll touch on that. But as far as me, for my career, starting in construction, I've been doing commercial construction for over 30 years now. So yeah, that makes me much, much older than Barb. But it started off here in Houston, Texas, working for several GCs locally. Worked my way up through and ended up at JDUM with Barb as senior project manager on a project for San Jacinto College, a project that I had previous relationship with from another company I had worked for in the past. But yeah, it's been fun. So ended up in the last few years on the development side, on the ownership side.
Yeah. Well, and I just touching real quickly on the team members that we had on that project. I mean, really, you look at where they've ended up now. We really had a fantastic team that has really succeeded and is doing such great things in the industry. Okay, but let's get back and let's talk about the PM and superintendent dynamic. So typically to date, most project manager and superintendent teams are made up of two men. But even so, the pairing of a project manager and a superintendent is like an arranged marriage. It is rare that we get to choose who we are paired up with, and instead the leadership team does that pairing, and we get stuck with it. So speaking from my previous position as an operations director, I can tell you that when leadership teams are choosing the project manager and superintendent pairing for a project, we are thinking about creating a matchup that has an equal balance as much as possible between their years of experience, their project type experience with that particular client or a similar client, as well as their experience in that particular town, region, or state. We are barely, if at all, factoring in personalities. Because let's face it, managing our own personalities is our responsibility, and our managers should not have to pair us based on whether or not we get along well with others. By the time we're running projects, especially this size, we should already know how to get along well with others. But that doesn't change that people have different personality types. So once you were paired for a project, it's up to the two of you. It was up to Coy and I to figure out how we were going to combine our personalities to successfully manage the project together. So, Coy, my question to you is, when we were paired as me, the superintendent, you, the project manager, what factors do you think leadership took into account for that pairing on that project?
Typically, we look at the pairing of the two that we want on the job, and it's almost really rare that you get the two people that you want to be on the job. Usually it's availability, right? You're paired by availability, not always capability. We were fortunate that we were both available, and they were both very capable. And I think our management looked at that and said, well, these are two people that absolutely know their fields and their perspective management and superintendent roles, and put us together without any fear. I think you and I had some reservations because I think that was our first time to really get to know each other. We'd see people, each other at functions, but we really didn't know each other, right? So we didn't know what to expect from each other, and we found out, and we tested, and we realized boundaries and expectations to be met, and areas that we came up short on and that we worked to improve on.
As soon as we get together, we get paired as a superintendent and project manager, one of the first things that we have to do well is we have to interview well for the project, because we had not been given the project yet when we were paired together. We had to interview for it, and at
Right.
that interview, it's important that we present as a team. And now that you're on the owner's side, I've been on the owner's side as well. I would like you to tell the listeners, like, as an owner, when you're watching these interviews, how important is it to you, and what things do you look for to see if these people really can be a good team together?
Oh, absolutely. I enjoyed preparing and going through the interview process with you, and then presenting to San Jacinto on that day. I remember sitting back thinking it was nice to hear the superintendent say something nice about me. It's only because you didn't get to know me yet.
That's
So,
right. That's
but
right.
but you're absolutely right. And I think the thing that really helped me and stood out immediately with you was your presentation. Not all builders are good presenters, and they don't always have to be. But boy, when you get one that can build, understand construction, and present, man, that makes for a long-term relationship, and something as an ownership I want to see in the position I'm in now. I want to see the interaction between my superintendent and my project manager. I want them I want them to finish sentences for each other. When they're talking, they're clicking.
Yeah.
They're both pulling in the same direction. And I know, and I speak for my jobs that I've got going now, but really good ones, my superintendent would have absolutely no problem whatsoever getting in and checking submittals and doing things to fill a void if they were a man down, to push that job forward. And I know my project manager would have no problem whatsoever coming in at 1 a.m. for a concrete placement. That they check their egos at the door.
Yeah.
They've got each other's back. And when you can present and show that to an owner, and it's evident, man, that's a home run.
Absolutely.
And
I felt
I wish I could really say that was the norm, but it's really not.
It's not. I've been on that other side, like you have on the owner's side, conducting those interviews, and man, it's by the time companies get to the interview stage, it's really more about how do you feel like they're going to work with you and work together, because by the time they're at the interview stage, they're already one of the top three. You're pretty much
Yeah,
willing to work with any of them. You want
yeah.
to see how they work together, and it's pretty telling when you do that. But okay, I'm going to ask you to put on your general contractor hat now, and I'm going to say, what kind of things did you do, or would you recommend for a project manager and a superintendent to do when they are just meeting each other and having to get together to present a unified front for an interview? What what are your recommendations to get to that point?
Well, I think everyone knows people that work at their company and what they've done and the projects they've been associated with, but they may not know what entailed on those projects. So sitting down and just getting to know each other, I knew you from the HCC job, when we had the hardware party where we went and hung doors and everything. Barb had me out there. We volunteered a Saturday and I went and hung doors all day long, and then she spent the next 3 days fixing the doors that I hung. So it was pretty beneficial to the job, as I like to think. But little stuff like that, if you can get yourself in a social situation, whether it's after work or whatever, even if it's at work, but something that just get to know each other one-on-one or team on team, and that you get to know their personality, right? And we're going to assume from the get-go that your capability is there, but I need to know your personality of how we're going to work together. We're both very alpha. We're both type 1 personalities.
We are.
And we found out real fast. It didn't take long to figure out how to push each other's buttons. But knowing somebody's heart and their personality on the other side of that, you kind of figure out, all right, well, that, I could take it one way, but I know Barb, and Barb would never do that. And hopefully you can say, well, Coy says stupid things, but that's not really what he means. That he'll tend to use, like you say, I'll use 50 words when 2 will suffice.
So true with you.
As I ramble on. So
okay, so we landed the project, and we landed the relationship as well, because we landed the project, we mobilized with a trailer, the two of us in a trailer, and then the project got stalled for 2 to 3 months. And this happens on a lot of projects, and many times the client loses the team, because that team, the contractor isn't just going to pay for them to sit there. But we created such a dynamic in that interview that the client said, no, we will pay to keep this team busy. And they did some piddly little project for us to manage for a couple months until the real project started. So that was a true testament to how well we presented in that interview. So then we had an experience that is unusual for most project managers and superintendents, because we were literally on a job for 2 to 3 months, but it was just the two of us. And we didn't have everything else going on with a bunch of subs and team members. We seriously just got to know each other. So during that time, do you remember anything, and putting you on the spot here, do you remember anything that you learned about working with me when it was just the first couple months? Because I remember a couple things about you.
I can imagine. I think it became evident to me almost immediately your punctuality and your schedule ability, and schedule is more than just sure track or P3 or whatever, P6 or whatever we're up to now. And it was your day-to-day schedule. We do things at this time, we do things at this time, and then we do things at this time. And if I'm not there at those particular times, that upsets your apple cart. I think that was pretty evident to me in the front. And then I knew that you were going to be, you're going to be watching me to make sure I do my job, and make sure that, my job, as I see it, is to make sure you have all the parts and pieces you need to build when you need them. That's in a nutshell what I did, is make sure that you had everything at your disposal for you to build the project. You were pretty sharp on the fact that, you knew when you needed things. And if I wasn't checking it, if you needed something in a week and I hadn't had a approved submittal yet, you knew that was a problem. So it was pretty evident up front that you were going to be a partner of mine, whether I wanted it or not, on the office.
Well, and so a couple things I will mention about you. One of the things that I remember learning about you, because we had typical standard trailer. I was in office down at one end and you were at the other end. You were somebody who, when you have a question, you just immediately ask it. And I tend to keep a list, and then I'll go in and have a conversation. And so I would just be working on something and I'd hear, hey, what about this? And I'd be like, what? Like, and if you remember, do you remember when I would say, I'm going undercover?
Yeah.
So what I would do is for me to focus some days, I just need to put music in and then I can just focus on what I'm doing. But what I wasn't able to do for Coy at that time was he would be hollering for something and I wouldn't know it because I was listening to music. So before I would put my headphones in, I would holler down the trailer, hey, I'm going undercover. And that meant I was putting in my headphones. So don't yell at me because I'm not going to hear
Right.
you. So learning to work with you in a way that, okay, you're not mad that I'm not responding.
Yeah.
Know that I needed some time and I'm working on something. But the other
I'm pretty sure at one point too that I had solved all the world's problems, and I'm just down at my end, just telling you away, and I'm waiting for a response, and I look down there, and you kind of look up and say me, and you pull your earplugs out and go, "What?" I'm like, I just lost all of that.
no doubt that happened. There were also the times when I would just start singing. I remember that as well. Um, so the other thing I remember though, during this get to know us phase when it was just the two of us is the feeling like this guy is going to be in my shit. Like he is into my superintendent stuff in a way that I don't think he's supposed to be, and that he is in my lane. And I remember, and this kind of goes to lane, but it also talks to something else a little. I remember one time a sub came in and I was telling him this is how it needs to be, and he didn't like my answer. And so he went to you, and you and he, because you've been in Houston forever, you had a previous relationship. He went to you, and then you came back to me, and you're like, hey, I talked to him. I think I got him off the ledge. This is what we're going to do. And I was irate. I mean, you thought you had done something nice to help solve the problem. And the way I saw it was, dude, you just told this guy that if he doesn't like my answer, he can go talk to you. And
Right.
it was I remember it very vividly, but I don't think it ever happened again. Between the two of us,
Yeah.
it's something that we learned right then, that you know what, we have our roles and
Yep.
we need to support each other and not overstep to help a
Right.
subcontractor get through to one or the other. And
Right.
I think that's something that you kind of wanted to talk about today was
Sure.
defining the roles of what is the role of each person.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, they didn't like mom's answer. They went to dad, and we can't
Yep.
have that. You know, that's just like with your kids, and you can't let you got to be unified on that. And I think I remember that incident very well. And remember thinking you're absolutely right. You know that they can't. And I think after that they would come down to me and I said, you headed to the wrong end of the trailer. You need to go talk to Barb, because don't even come down here because I'm gonna tell you something wrong. Go get on her page, and then we'll all be on the same page. And I remember thinking that very well. And I remember too, it's funny you bring that up, that you were talking about being in each other's shit. I remember you come in like you did. You were very organized. You came into my office just like you said, and you had a list of things that I was behind on. And I sat there, and you were going through them, and I'm like, yep, 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 you're absolutely right. Yep, yep. And I took it all. And then you said, well, you know, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I got up and I put on my vest and I put on my hard hat. You go, well, what are you doing? Where are you going? I said, well, I'm gonna go walk the job, and I'm gonna point out all the shit that you're behind on and all the things that are wrong. And you're like, oh, you know, you're not. Boy, you were right on my butt. And we were both out there, and I'm pointing at stuff, and you were writing it down. Of course, the next morning you come back with a list of everything that I'd pointed out and all the corrections that had been made. And then I had nothing done at that time. Like, I finished my list. Where's your list? Like, all right, you win.
That sounds like us. I don't remember it, but I believe it. Um, okay, so what I want to talk about next is when the team showed up. Like I
Yes.
said, we did have a great team. And when that team showed up and we actually started functioning, what do you think we did well as a PM superintendent team, managing our individual teams as a combined team?
I don't think we ever split up us and them. You know, I don't. Yeah, Kara was on my side, and you know, Jason was on your side, and but I don't think we ever really looked at things as project management and superintendent. I think we looked at it as the Sanjak team and the
Yeah.
project.
Yeah.
And I think we all knew our roles and we all knew what we did, but we never siloed. We didn't silo, and I think that was the best thing we did. And that started with you and I. That you and I would sit down and something like the schedule. We'd go through the schedule and stuff. We would sit side by side, line by line, discuss every update and what we thought it was going to take to get it done. You would ask me my opinion. So how I said, I think we got 5 days. We got 4 days. Okay, we'll go with 4. And then, whatever it was, we went through and they saw that we worked the project together. And I think that helped. The whole, you and I had our own dynamic, and Jason and Kara had their dynamic, and we had to work through that. And it was, but I think we set a good example for them. So it was easy for them to get upset and then fall back and look at us and then to get over whatever was upsetting them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think part of what we did as well was we created a job site family dynamic. And,
Yes.
I had learned early on my career about Friday lunches. And so on Fridays, the whole team would get together in the trailer.
Yep.
We would order food from somewhere. And granted, it was, I'm not saying that the project was paying for it. People still had to pay for their own lunches, but everybody sat together and we
Yeah.
weren't allowed to talk about work. It was only
Yes.
talking about each other and what was going on in our lives. And so it created this dynamic where we knew and cared about each other. And I think that is really what helps knock down those silos that are on so many jobs. You have to get to know each other as people so that, like you said earlier, you can start to say, okay, it may have come across that way, but I know him. He didn't mean it that way. I know
Right.
that he did not have ill intention when this happened, but I do want to understand what's going on. I think you've got to create that family dynamic.
Without a doubt. Agree 100%.
All right. So, what do you think we did well as a unified team, you and I, managing our subcontractors, our client, and our neighboring community?
Ooh, the 3 different topics, completely different there in my mind.
Okay.
The superintendent and the field staff. I would sit in on your meetings, and it was rare that I said a word. I would just sit back. That's probably the only time you ever saw me in a meeting be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
All the other times I'm talking a lot. But I would always just sit in, just show my support. I would sit behind you or sit at the table or sit in the corner somewhere, just in case something came up with any kind of question that you had.
Yeah.
I'll let you lead that, and well, there was no letting. You took it, so it was yours, and that's fine. As far as the community goes, I don't know. I can't. I'm trying. Oh, I remember the hawk deal. Remember that?
I
Remember
remember
the
the
hawk's
hawk.
nest? Yeah,
Yeah.
the hawk's nest. That's something we took and we embraced and managing the community expectations. For the quick story that there was a hawk's nest where right in the center of a detention pond that Barb and I had to dig out, and somebody had noticed it and presented it to us, and we dug around that tree for I don't know 4 or 5 months. I had one single tree sticking up in the middle of a huge detention pond, and actually had to wait and got a bucket truck out there to go check the nest to make sure it was empty before we took the tree out. And that made the neighbors happy, that we didn't disrupt that during that time. And then the last part of that is the on the ownership side. I think it was so evident that you and I were a team and we're paired up, that, like you said, that when the project got delayed, the college found ways to keep the team together, and really paid for us to sit out there, and we were working on the job that was to come. Still writing contracts and everything. We just couldn't build anything yet. Gave us another project to manage, that had its own general contractor. So we were a general contractor watching another general contractor, to help them out. And I think that speaks volumes. And again, they didn't look at I think the best compliment that I can give or was given, is San Jacinto didn't look at us as a superintendent or project manager. They looked at us as Barb and Coy, and they're over this project.
Yeah.
And I think that was great. If you can get that kind of relationship from your ownership group, I think that's a win.
Yeah, I think that we couple things that we did really well with subs and the client is we backed each other in a way that they knew they couldn't go to one to get another answer. But what else that we did, and this was not always easy for each of us, but if a sub would come to me and say, well, Coy told me to do this, if it infuriated me so many times, the easy answer is, fuck that, we're going to do it the way I told you to do it. That didn't work. It doesn't work to keep that team dynamic. And instead the response is, okay, that's interesting. I'm going to talk to Coy and see where he's coming from on that. And I may still go into your office and say the previous words, like,
right?
What the fuck are you thinking here, right? But we're going to have that conversation with us. We're not going to throw each other under the bus and let our subs and our client think that the other one just made a crappy decision and now we're against each other. Right. Speaking of the community, though, I want to bring up one story I remember. Do you remember going to the town hall?
Yes.
So there was I can't even remember why, but the community wanted, I think it was because we were tearing down so many trees and they just didn't like it. Yep. Were you going to interrupt?
Yeah, we were going through we had drainage going through that subdivision too.
Oh, okay.
Just tying into that subdivision.
As old as you are, I'm surprised your memory is so much.
I know, it's shocking, right?
Anyway, what I remember is I wasn't able to make it to that particular meeting, but you and Rizzo went, and yes. Who was our owner's rep. And I remember hearing the next day that there was a guy that stood up from the community and he was like, the superintendent told me this, and they told me this, and they told me this, and they told me this, which was all BS because I had not said it. But instead of you guys thinking, I can't believe she would say that, you guys automatically knew I would not have said that. And instead, one of you stood up and said, okay, wait, can you describe the superintendent? And I loved hearing that story because the description that they gave was male, whatever description.
Big guy, male, hard hat.
Yeah. And then one of you was like, yeah, well, ours is a female that is 100 pounds soaking wet. So you are clearly not talking to the man in charge and you're getting misinformation. And I loved feeling that support and hearing that story the next day. Nobody came to me and said, did you do this? You knew better. You knew who I was.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now let's talk about what we could have done better. Where did we not go? Where did we kind of get offline?
That's going to be tough for the two of us because we're perfect. So
well, this is true. So let me help you out. I will tell you what I thought because I had some pre-time to think about this. I think both of us are emotional and
absolutely.
And passionate. I think a lot of the construction industry professionals we are passionate about our industry. And when we did get emotional, even if it wasn't in front of like outbursts in front of subs or our team or whatever, we would feel that toward each other. I mean, your face, your entire head would turn bright red. You would be so mad at me. And because it is a male-female partnering, how many times I would hear somebody say, oh, mom and dad are fighting, And looking back at that time, it was kind of funny, but thinking, man, it really affected the team. They knew when we weren't getting along, even if we weren't airing our dirty laundry, they could tell that we were not on the same page. And sometimes we would go for days where we barely spoke or completely avoided each other. And I remember specifically one day, one of our team members coming to me and saying, enough, the parents need to reconcile. It's affecting everybody. And I was like, well, shit. And I think that one of your team members had the same conversation to you, because then what always happened to end our arguments? White on white on
Ice
white.
cream, yeah, white on white on white. Yeah.
So, so
Barb's
never mind.
favorite ice cream was vanilla ice cream from Dairy Queen, with whipped cream and marshmallow sauce.
That's right.
I
White on white
called
on
it
white.
white on white on white.
And Coy would walk in holding that, and I knew that that was the white flag. It
That
was
was
all
my olive
over.
branch.
Yes. I look back though now, Coy, and I think I don't know that I had one. I feel like for the most part, you were the one that always threw the flag, and for that, I am grateful. I I hopefully have come a long way since then, but you were the one who typically stepped up and made that offering.
Well, it's not because I was a great manager, it's because I'm inherently lazy and I needed your help. And so I would I was smart enough to see that well, she's not going to help me if she's mad at me. And so I need to what's best for the job is to go buy some ice cream and bring it to her and offer and say, I'm sorry. And it was amazing. We really didn't. We didn't keep grudges, and we didn't, we took things personally at the surface, but I knew deep down that you never ever did anything that you thought was bad for the job to hurt me, or anything like that. And so I may get mad, and you got mad. We trusted. We were like brothers and sisters on that job, and just that had to live together. That with for years. That was a long project, and to get all the way through it. And yeah, if you tell me a sibling relationship that doesn't have times that they fight,
Right.
or argue, and I'm just glad that we didn't pull hair. I didn't have any hair to pull, but you just get mad at each other that way, make it physical, because I'm pretty sure you could take me in a fight. So,
Uh,
so but it was I knew when it was time. And you did. I know at least one time you came to my office and you stood in my door and you just stared at me and you smiled, and I looked at you and I shook my head. You said, let's go get ice cream, and I said, all right, let's go. So yeah, you did it at least once. I remember well that you did that, because I was very mad, and who knows what I was mad about, but it was something stupid. But I remember after a while you like that's enough. It's all right. Got to
well,
move
and
on.
that's a great point too, is that so much stuff that we get so mad about, a year from then, we don't even remember what it was.
No,
It
no.
really doesn't matter that much. And so I think the lesson here is just learning that it does affect the entire team. And it slows
Sure.
productivity. And I think that what we could have done better was simply address it sooner. I think that
Yes.
it's it doesn't work for everyone to say, okay, let's sit down right now and just get through this. I'm not someone who can do that. I need time to calm down and think it through. But within a day, you should be able to sit down, go to lunch, say, okay, let's just get it on the table and let's get it over with. We should
Yeah.
not let it drag out for several days the way we did on a couple of occasions.
Right.
So that would be my advice to people
And
who it happens.
absolutely, it happens. And if it doesn't happen on your job, I would be curious as to why, because most people in construction are passionate about the profession, and about the projects that they do, and it's healthy to have argument and debate and everything. That's perfectly fine. Is just don't make it personal. We
That's
never
right.
made it personal. You never once came into my office and said, you dumb son of a bitch. Why'd you do this? You might have cussed the decision, you might have cussed the answers that were given, but you never cussed me. And,
Right.
and I did the same to you. I never ever made anything personal towards you.
Yeah.
Now I got mad, and I got a lot of stuff and heated, and we got what I like to say, we had some elevated conversations that got up there, but we never made it personal. But once you make it personal, then that recovery even gets longer,
It's
because
harder.
yeah, if it's possible at all.
You
We
can't
always
take it
knew
back.
that it was the situation, it was not us, and it's the decisions that were being made, that it's not always us. And sometimes, I'll admit that, that I'd get pissed off at a decision you made, whatever it was, And then I go find out why you made a decision, and I'd be like, oh, that makes sense. I didn't have the whole story. I didn't know why you would do certain things. And then once I found out, and when you start and you got that kind of relationship with somebody, you start realizing that it goes back to, like you said, we knew that the guy that was at the town hall meeting had talked to the lead superintendent, said all of these things that were absolutely not decisions you would have ever made. We knew that he was not talking to the right person if he was talking to anyone at all. And so, and there were later on in that job, there were things that would immediately make the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and I'd be like, and I'd go, wait a minute, now she wouldn't have never done that. Nope, she wouldn't have done that. And then the jobs just get the flow.
Well, and I think I want to touch base on something you said about knowing the whole story and tying it back to our team and our team feeling like a family. Like you said, our teams didn't always get along. Jason and Kara, they had their moments as well.
Yep.
And I think something that we were both good at is, Jason may come to me all frustrated about something that had happened, but I didn't just go to you and say, hey, I needed to go and find out what you'd heard from Kara. And then together we needed to sit them down and say, here's what we know. This is what we need to do going forward. It was making sure we had the whole story and figuring out the best way to address it as a team instead of just protecting our person.
Yep. And I agreed 100%. And then sometimes when you do that, you find out that it's not the answer you kind of want. You'd come to me about another member of the team being behind on submittals. It was Stephen being behind on the submittals. And I immediately bowed up and defended, blah, 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 blah. And then I went and sat down and started going through his log and everything. And I realized he was, and I had to eat crow on that. So, it's sometimes it's you don't get the answer you want, but it's the answer you get. And you get to, you get to learn to say, well, the lesson I learned on that was, well, Barb's coming to me for a reason. She's not just tattletaling, there's something going on, and I need to dig deeper and find out why. And get the whole story.
Yeah. Well, I have loved this conversation, but I want to wrap it up. Our relationship has not always been easy, but it has always been one that I have valued since the time that we worked together. And now you actually have this in a recording, so you can play it back. And no doubt I'm going to hear it again someday. You're going to be playing it back to me. But I am so grateful that you took the time to do this. I know it was outside your comfort zone, but I really think that people, the listeners, are going to learn from this episode today. So thank you for making the time. If you know someone that could benefit from this particular episode, then share it with them. Or if you want to continue to learn about the untapped and underutilized resources that will take your business to the next level, then follow the podcast. You don't want to miss an episode where we discuss what you needed to hear. And lastly, there is a link in the show notes that will allow you to reach out to me directly if you want to accelerate that learning curve. Thanks for listening. Talk soon.